Hey entrepreneurs, do you have strategic acumen? Today we sit down with Alex Brueckmann from Brueckmann Executive Consulting. Throughout this conversation, we talk about the 9 elements of organizational identity and the vulnerability-based trust you need as an organization to develop a business strategy and the accountability to implement it. We hope you enjoy this episode with Alex Brueckmann. Alex, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast. Would love to learn a little bit more about yourself. You have your own consulting firm, executive coaching firm. Can you maybe give us a little bit of history of how you came to the entrepreneurial coaching world and a little bit of your background?
I actually started out in a completely different field. I used to be a radio journalist, so I have a professional education in the media industry as a content creator. So I designed and hosted radio shows, and later figured that there might be more. So I went to university, studied business administration, went back into the media industry, but this time in the management space, not in content creator space, and started to get engaged in strategy initiatives, business strategy initiatives like restructuring, reorganizations, and creating basically new markets for a certain part of this global media conglomerate I was working for. I did that for a few years, had the opportunity to work as a client with some really large consultancies, McKinsey and Company, A.T. Kearney, that caliber. So I learned a lot from them when it comes to what types of processes, thinking, and tools they use when they help other companies talk strategy.
Okay.
I then became, because I was fascinated by that, I then became a strategy consultant myself. So management consultant hired by another company. And after some time realized that I'm more interested about the people aspect of strategy and change,
Okay.
rather than, let's say, the restructuring piece when it comes to helping companies in distress.
Okay.
So helping companies in distress is super important. It's just on my ballgame. I did that for many years.
Not as fun either.
Yeah. So there is fun in it, but it's really, really difficult once you see what it does to the people involved, to the employees of the companies. And I did that for about 5 years, and I was like, okay, I need something else now. Yep. So I switched to management consulting in the strategy space, more from a coaching perspective than from a consulting perspective. So rather than coming in and telling people what we think as consultants they should do, I help them understand, first of all, what business strategy actually is, and how they themselves can design it without relying too much on external help, with the goal that once the strategy is designed, they fully own it because it's their baby. They created it. I just held the space for them. I guide them through the processes in order to involve the organization appropriately and everything that needs to be done when it comes to designing a business strategy.
Sure.
But then I'm hands off and I leave, and the things happen and don't just fall apart. What I saw very often when I was still a consultant, that as soon as the consultants leave, the management goes like, okay, what do we do with this now? And
Gotcha.
Since they not necessarily have the experience of implementing a strategic plan over time, rigorously, with everything that needs to be in place, unfortunately, very often those strategy initiatives then fail. Not because the strategy as such was bad, but because people would not know what to do with it, how to implement, how to follow through. That's where I come in as a coach, help them stay sharp and revisit the strategic plan from time to time, etc. That's how I ended up there.
Wow, that's there's so many different places to go with this one, but I want to start with this. You said I often am educating business owners on what really is a business strategy to begin with. Can you give us a sampling? If I was a business owner and Rich, and I were in business together, and we had hired you, and you said, hey, I want to first educate you guys very simply. What is business strategy? How would you define it in your words?
Well, it's actually the first step in my kickoff session with any leadership team to start talking the same language. Because if we miss that piece, everyone in the room would have a certain fuzzy understanding about what strategy is based on their previous work experience, right? And books that they read and God knows what. So for some, when they hear strategy, it's a term that sounds cool. That's kind of applicable to a lot of things, but they don't actually know what it means. Yeah. So I often create some sort of a definition together with the people in the room that then sounds something like a strategy, a business strategy is a plan that helps us focus on a handful of key priorities in order to reach a defined vision of how our company should look like in 3 to 5 years, for example.
Okay.
Or in 2 years, or in whatever the time frame of that exercise is. So it's really about understanding the key priorities of an organization in order to focus the resources accordingly.
Sure.
And it's not tactics, it's not details. It's like a map that you enter first time in your life, unknown territory, but at least you have a map. And that map helps you navigate the uncertainties and unknowns. Because what strategy actually also is, it needs to scare the hell out of you. Once you've written down your strategic plan and it doesn't scare you, it's probably not worth the paper it's written on, because you basically already know what to do, you're already there. And that's what's operational excellence. That's not strategic thinking and forward planning.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what strategy is in my own words.
That's awesome, Alex. And this is very ironic because I think we had this podcast scheduled prior and we scheduled it to today. So it's a complete coincidence, but I am literally today hosting and coordinating a 3 to 5 year strategic planning session with one of our companies that lasts today, going to dinner tonight and doing it all day tomorrow. So this is very fresh to me. We're actually in the process of doing this right now. Awesome. And when you talk about a plan to focus on priorities for the next 3 to 5 years, it matches exactly, like we call it our 3 to 5 year planning strategic session. So it kind of matches in. So when you work with a company and you come in and it's very, I would definitely encourage any entrepreneurs or CEOs listening to this. It is very hard for you to do your own 3 to 5 year plan, and probably feeds into what you just said, which is you might take the easy road. You might not ask yourself the tough questions. You might not challenge yourself. The paper may not scare you, like you said at the end of it. And I'm assuming that one of the values you bring to the table is the ability to kind of take the team and stretch them a little bit in terms of their thinking and process. Is that a fair statement?
It absolutely is. And one of the key moments in one of the early meetings in such a process is that I help executive teams detach from their roles. So I work with a bunch of people that do not think about what their potential future role will look like in this new strategy. So we disconnect our operational responsibilities and roles that we have today from what we want to create for the company 5 years down the road, because maybe those roles need to change. Maybe they don't exist anymore. Maybe they evolve. So it's really important to get this group of people, first of all, into the right mindset. And there are a few things that come to that. So first of all, detach yourself from the role that you have today. The next thing that we need to discuss is, are we talking about what type of mindset are we in right now? Are we in an operational mindset, or are we in a strategic mindset? You need completely different ways of thinking when you strategize than if you just focus on your daily business. So getting out of your role, getting out of your daily business. And then the third thing is just apply a mindset of abundance rather than a mindset of scarcity. And what that means in the strategy context is think possibilities. Don't think, we tried that, it doesn't work because. So anytime someone starts a sentence like that, everyone starts laughing, because those sentences come up, But when you have agreed in the very beginning that you focus on possibilities rather than on risk avoidance in your strategy, once those sentences come up anyway, everyone immediately realizes it, and it just eases the tension, and it's kind of nice because people then dare to strategize. rather than giving their opinion on something.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and it goes right into Rich, your wheelhouse, right? Which is really personal security, personal leadership, personal mindset as you go into a strategy session. Are you thinking about where's my name on the org chart? What's going on here? Or are you thinking about the overall good of the business? And I think from a psychology perspective, Rich, I'd love to get your opinion on this or what your thoughts are. But when you go into sometimes these strategic planning sessions, and you're too attached to the business, you're too attached to each other, you're too attached to your team, conflict starts coming in because you can't detach. So Alex, that's a critical point. And Rich, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, which is the psychology that comes into leaders when they start getting into strategic planning. Can they detach themselves? And maybe Alex, you can share with Rich and I some tips on that. But Rich, I'd love to get your thoughts on really the human nature side of this.
I think it's all about self-preservation. Somebody goes into a strategic meeting, and if you detach from what your current job function is, it may leave you wondering what is your job function later. So it's in self-interest and self-preservation that people will go to a strategic meeting and represent their current job function. That's not actually a strategic meeting. That's a meeting of, direct supervisors or department heads, and that's a very important meeting, but that's not a strategic meeting. Alex, what's your perspective on that?
I absolutely, totally agree with what you just said, Rich. And I've seen what happens when people let go of their current roles. It's amazing how freely they then can speak. The issue is you need to do some pre-work to help people over that fence, if you know what I mean.
What does that pre-work look like, Alex? So for our listeners who say, I want to be on the right side of this, I want to have a strategic meeting. I like what Alex is talking about. All right, what do I do? Can you tell them what to do?
Absolutely. Ask yourself, first of all, what's the trust level in my executive team? So the people that actually lead the company and those experts that I want to pull into the strategy process, do they trust each other? Do they trust that they have the best intention when they come into the room? Or does the team have a history of politics, stabbing each other in the back, and so on? So without a trustful environment, people will not let go of their roles because that's what keeps them safe and secure. Once you have opened them up for talking trust, we need to understand what we actually talk about when we talk about trust. And I like to take the definition of trust as Patrick Lencioni uses it. He's talking about vulnerability-based trust. We're not talking about, I trust you, John and Rich, that you guys are doing your job. That's a given.
Sure.
I trust you guys that if I open up and be vulnerable, you guys won't use it against me. And if we can achieve that as a small group, then we are leading different types of discussions. We're talking differently to each other, and we are not afraid that whatever we discuss will be leaked to someone, will be twisted and used against me. And it is the absolute fundamental basis of a proper strategy process. Now, the thing is, you can't do one thing without the other. Building trust in a vacuum is kind of an artificial exercise. And most senior teams that I work with be like, really? Does that mean we need to stand on a table and fall backwards and the rest catches us? That's pathetic. That's not trust building. That's just games for grown-ups. Yeah. So what we do is basically build the trust and the strategy at the same time, step by step, in an iterative process. Combining executive team development and strategy development makes both elements tangible because they really understand why they need this trust, because it helps them build a better business. Yep. And thereby building their future, building their the security that they need. People that are able to do that are typically not afraid anymore of not having a job in the future because they know that this is such a scarce, how do I say that? It's a skill that not everyone has. Yeah. If you display that skill, if you lean in and are able to do that, you will always be in need because that's what companies actually need.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for that. We do in our business some of what is in the advantage from Patrick Lencioni, and that is what you're talking about, some of the trust development and strategy development and a bit of a 1-2 punch. And on the trust development side, there's the personal histories exercise. That's kind of the classic opening the door to it. But a lot of our owners, of our franchise owners, struggle then to go, where do I go from here? How do I develop vulnerability-based trust? And often they end up stopping creating vulnerability-based trust or any focus on that at all, because it's easier to talk strategy and accountability because it's more operational. How do you go about encouraging, and what exercises do you encourage as a leadership team continues to meet that will continue to develop vulnerability-based trust?
First of all, it's not a linear process, right? So, and it's just like you explained, Rich. Many teams start with it and it just feels uncomfortable for many and they back out of it. So yeah, that happens. But those who stick through it, they reap the benefits fairly quickly because they all of a sudden see what it means for the team dynamic. So I try to help them as fast as possible to start working on, for example, their vision statement. What is it that the company should look like? And by going into the strategy work quickly, helping them see the value of opening up, they understand that if I let them imagine what would be possible if they were able to stick with that. And at the same time, I also challenge them to do the same with their teams in their operational business, to give them some, let's say, an area where they're in charge. And if they then start implementing those vulnerability-based trust exercises, opening up to their teams, maybe one person at a time, they experience how it also helps them in an operational environment. So not in a strategic, but an operational environment. So by combining those two things, they see that there is actual value in it also on the job. And that keeps most of them engaged. I'm totally transparent here. You never get everyone over the finish line in such a process. The bigger the company, the more people are involved, the more will try to back out. And this is typically in such a process, if you really dig deep, you understand also as a board of directors which executives are the ones you should count on in the future and which ones are just not making the leap.
Well, I'll give you a couple examples of some stuff we do, and I'd love to see if you'd be open to offering up any tools that you'd recommend. Some things that we've done outside of just a personal histories exercise is using Myers-Briggs and having people show with their leadership team where their personality may be working against them, or a caliper assessment, or Enneagram is another one. Another thing we did at an offsite is we used a Brene Brown video. I think she has a 2-hour video on Netflix. Everybody watched the Brene Brown video, took notes, and had a conversation around what they watched or how it applied to them. Brene Brown has Dare to Lead is a book of hers that has an accompanying workbook that's free online on her website that will go on, grab the workbook and, cherry pick questions from that we'll bring into the offsite. Do you have specific tools like those that you can offer our listeners to lean on who are struggling with, how do I develop vulnerability-based trust now?
So the tools that you mentioned, some of them are so-called psychometric tests. And psychometric tests do have an incredible advantage, and they also have incredible disadvantages. You need to know which ones actually work and which ones are state-of-the-art. For example, combining the Enneagram with a leadership 360 feedback might be incredibly powerful. Something that also helps teams open up and create vulnerability-based trust is one of my personal favorite tools is the Gallup Strength Finder by the Clifton Institute. It's first of all super cheap. Second of all, has millions of data points in their database, so it's extremely reliable and reality tested. And we know that, like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, it has been shown time and again that the test as such is based on on theory and on data points that we now know are a bit outdated. So we need to be careful which tests we use and how we combine them. But the magic is not the test as such. The magic happens when people be like, in my 360, I heard from my team that X, Y, Z, that I'm a bad listener, for example, that I need to do a better job taking feedback. And I heard from you guys, my peer group, that you're actually afraid of me because every time you say something, I get aggressive. And it's actually super humbling taking a look at that. So if you then start sharing those things, people go like, oh my God, now I understand why you always behave that way, because your top 5 strengths and your Clifton Gallup Strength Finder show me this, this, and that. Now it's becoming totally clear, because what people often see is the negative side of one of my strengths. Every time you overuse a certain strength, it becomes kind of a shadow side. And that's when people start getting annoyed by something. So rather than saying, you're a freaking micromanager, you just take away all air to breathe, all of a sudden you understand where it comes from, because in your top 5, there might be a strength called maximizer, which is someone who always wants to do better and better and better and get the most out of the time, get the best result out of something. So people start to understand themselves better. They understand their true selves, and they start talking about where it comes from, which experiences that they've made over time. So whether it's a video that you share, whether it's psychometric tools, whether it's the childhood stories exercise that you mentioned, combine them. The magic happens when you combine them. Don't rely on just one of them. Ideally, you build something that is dovetailed or tailor-made for your team. So for example, the 360 feedback that I mentioned, the leadership feedback that we use, is there is a certain framework, but within that framework, we adjust it to include and incorporate anything that exists that's of value in that context of strategizing, anything that exists that is, let's say, a set of values or a set of key principles that a company has. You should include these, because in the end, the magic happens when you create more than just a strategy. That's what I call an identity, an organizational identity. When your values, your guiding principles, your purpose and impact, your mission, your vision, your strategy, your management systems, everything around that, when it comes together, when it becomes one. So vulnerability-based trust in that context enables a discussion about a company's strategy, yes, but the process that you go through to create your strategy has the power to also touch all the other elements around it. So that's why you should always try to include those other elements, those softer elements, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, Alex, you just mentioned a few seconds ago organizational identity. And this plays a little bit into strategy, but it's not just strategy. It's who are we, as an identity. That's a much different exercise than what are our priorities for the next 3 to 5 years to get to where we want to get. It's who are we? It's a much macro level question. And I did notice that you maybe have a process for that, or I saw 9 elements of an organizational identity. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that means, organizational identity, and what those elements are that combine to make an identity?
Absolutely. And so this is basically the content of my book that will come out next year. It describes the 9 elements of organizational identity and how you can actually bring them to life, how you should define them and then bring them to life. And what that actually means is this. An organizational identity, yes, it's the question, who are we? And the elements that describe who we are elements that are sometimes a bit, let's say, softer elements, right? And harder elements. You can actually group them into 3 groups of 3 elements each.
Okay.
In the center, you need to ask yourself, who am I, right? Also as a person, you need to ask yourself, what values do I base my decisions on? Which behavioral principles guide how I interact with my clients, with my peers, with my investors, for example. So at the center, you would always have something like your purpose, and the impact that you want to create. Purpose for me is just an intent. You need to go beyond purpose. You need to ask yourself, what is the impact that I want to create based on my purpose? That's number one. The second one is, what is my mission? And I use a definition of mission that is sometimes a bit, for some people it's too thin. I basically ask yourself, what is it actually that you do, and for whom do you do it? Fairly straightforward. So you could fluff it up with fancy words, but in the end it's one sentence. So for example, my mission is I provide courses, books, trainings around organizational identity and business strategy to entrepreneurs. That's what I do. No fancy adjectives around it, right? So you have your purpose statement and impact statement, you have your mission, and you have your values and guiding principles at the center, at the core. Now, around that, you have your strategic elements. You have your, 3-year strategy, maybe 5-year strategy. You have your vision statement. So your strategy is basically your plan in order to reach the vision. And the third element in that circle around that core piece is what I call goals, strategic goals. And this is where many companies actually fail. They are able to write down a cool vision statement. They even are able kind of to prioritize, but then they fall short on measuring their progress over time. But that's where goals come into play, strategic goals. How do you make them measurable? Because if you don't measure the progress over time, and I'm not talking about measuring yourself to death, I'm really talking about strategic level measurement. How do you know that you're moving towards your vision? If your KPIs move in the right direction, because you derive them from your vision statement. That's how vision, strategy, and goals actually connect. So, and around these is the third layer with the final 3 elements, which are management systems, capabilities, and targets. And they actually connect to the inner circles. So your targets are your individualized goals. Based on those strategic goals, everyone needs to understand what their contributions. First of all, it's because of measurability, and second of all, because it's super motivating for people to understand how they contribute in bringing an organization's identity to life. What is my contribution here? In order to perform accordingly and to reach their targets based on strategic goals, they need to have certain capabilities. And these can be soft skills and hard skills that you need to take a look at. When I talk to leaders, I often talk only about leadership capabilities, because usually they have 10, 15 years under the belt. I can't tell them anything about their subject matter expertise. So we talk about leadership capabilities. And the last element here is management systems. Once you are implementing a new strategy, you go against the status quo. And that's what many companies don't understand. Strategy means change. If it doesn't, it's not worth the paper it's written on. But in order to keep the company stable through a change, you need to anchor the new ways of working afterwards in a way that you let go of the previous ways of working. A company's management systems are created in order to keep a company stable, and that goes inherently against the change that comes with the strategic plan. So you need to adjust those 9 elements. And your strategy process, the process of actually defining your strategy, is the perfect vehicle to touch all those 9 elements, not just the strategy piece. Because there is no other piece in your business that has that reach, that is connected to your purpose, to your management system. The only element that has that reach throughout people, processes, and profits is your strategy. And when companies understand that, how it connects, they are actually really smart, because they go through the process once, rather than going through a strategy cycle and then be like, oh, we need to redefine our purpose. Whom do we ask to do that? And you will realize they always ask the same people that are always super busy, but they are the brightest minds, so you want to include them every time you go through such an exercise. Guess what? Do it once and they're on board. Ask them the 3rd time, the 4th time, the 5th time. You realize where I'm going with that, right?
Yep. So let me recap that, because I feel like I'm missing one, but it also appears that there's a graphic that comes along with this. So I'd love to get that graphic so we can have our audience have that as well. But the 9 elements I got were values, guiding principles, purpose and impact, mission. Then I got 3 to 5 year strategic plan, strategic goals. I feel like I'm missing one in that bucket.
The vision.
Vision. Okay, perfect. And then the last 3 were management systems, capabilities, and targets.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you
And
very much.
You actually find that graphic on my website, alexthestrategist.com. It's all there. And they are all explained there.
Yeah, we'll share that link. That's fantastic. So it's great, exciting to hear you have a new book coming out. I'm assuming it's called The 9 Elements of Organizational Identity.
Well, that's probably the subtitle, maybe. But honestly, there are people that are better in naming books than I am. I just provide the content and then I listen to what they suggest.
Exactly. So one question I had when you were going through that I just wanted to probe into, we do with our organization a review of our 3 to 5 year strategic plan every year. We don't wait 3 to 5 years and then look at it again. It's around this time every year, which is Q4. We look at our 3 to 5 year strategic plan and we go through it and we reinforce and implement. But there isn't necessarily a big change every year. It seems like when you were saying when you have a strategic plan, it means change. Yeah. Why is that the case in your mind? Because I haven't necessarily experienced that all the time, although there may be some change in it. It's not all change.
So what is a strategy? A strategy is your plan in order to reach a certain vision, a certain state in the future. And that state is something that you hope to achieve because you believe it will strengthen your competitiveness, your earning power, whatever it might be. And in order to change towards this vision, in order to reach that vision, if your company is already there, what's the point of having a strategy? So a strategy as such inherently needs to stretch you to a place where everyone goes like, it scares the crap out of me, but I know that's the place to be. And that's why I want to get there. I don't know what I need to learn in order to manage and to lead us in that direction, but I know that I do not know everything now. If I knew everything now, we probably would be there already, right? So it comes with new processes, new systems, new learnings, new capabilities. And that is for the long run. So what I tell my clients very often is you need to have this yearly strategic review. And in addition to that, you need 2 to 3 in between. You need 2 to 3 strategic meetings where you check the implementation progress. And in your review meeting, you check the big picture. You lift your head up and be like, are we still on track? In between, you're checking whether you're implementing, whether you're performing according to your strategic priorities. It's a different type of meeting. If you do that strategic review once a year, you should see tremendous progress over a year. And you would see how things are moving. Of course, you can't achieve a 5-year strategy in a year, but you need to stretch yourself constantly and ask yourself, where can we do better? Where can we be faster? So I think it was Elon Musk who said something along the lines of course, I can't fly to Mars within a year. But if I started out and said, we do it in the next 20, we probably need 20. If I start out and say we do it in 5, we probably need 6. But I'm still so much faster than I would have been originally if I were realistic, if you know what I mean.
I love it.
So I think what I heard is your answer to John's question around strategy and state of change and how are they connected. To tie that back to something you said earlier, is if you want the results that you've always gotten and you want to remain relatively stable, you don't need a strategy. You just need management systems. Work on your management systems. But if you want to get to somewhere where you're not currently, it's going to require a strategy.
Let me give an example. If you go to the website of McDonald's and you read their strategic statement, their strategy, if you don't start laughing after our conversation, you miss the point. Their strategy, what they call a strategy, is selling more meals more often to more people. That is not a strategy. That is operational excellence. That's doing faster, better, harder, stronger of what you do already. And a strategy, a strategic plan is exactly what you said, Rich. It should be something where you're not, but where you want to be. And that comes with with fear, because you don't know. You just don't know. And if you can channel that fear into excitement and fire people up, that's kind of the old saying. If you want people to build a ship, don't tell them to gather wood, screw it together and put it into the water. Teach them about foreign countries so that they want to go there, right? So their yearning for something will drive you there, not your micromanagement and your operational excellence. So I can only recommend, when you take a look at, whoever listens now, if you take a look at your strategic plan and you're like, yeah, that's basically just what we do today, but this time we do it really well, then rethink your strategy. Get your best people in the room and think differently.
Powerful. I'm curious, in your experience with all of the clients that you've worked with, I'd love to know, what are the best ways to screw up when it comes to strategy? and the reason why I want to know it from that access point is there are some listeners that if you describe either a case study, not to mention the name of the company you worked with, hey, here's a company and here's how they were doing, they were blowing it. It may resonate with some of our listeners as, oh gosh, that's what I'm doing. So I'd love to hear, what are the most common, biggest ways to screw up strategy as a company?
I think the first and most important one is kind of the reverse of what we discussed. If you go into a strategic planning process based on your own ego, based on fear, based on the mindset of scarcity, then you just stop it right there, because the result of that will not be a strategy. The result of that will be trying to preserve the power and the position that you have right now. So not making yourself free of your ego, of your role, is the first mistake, because then you basically set your mind into the existing structure of an organization and you don't allow to think differently. The second mistake is to rely entirely on external knowledge. So of course you can buy market insight reports and all these things, but guess who else buys those? Everyone else. It's not unique knowledge. So what's the antidote of that? Start building your own foresight. Bring people on board that understand how to deconstruct customer behavior and to help you design services and products that truly help solve their problems in the future. So when I use the term foresight, I don't mean looking into a crystal ball. There is a process behind that. Actually, not many companies use it. It's a fairly young discipline still. But I've been recently talking to people in major corporations that are involved in building up and scaling foresight departments. It's absolutely amazing what they do. And I'm not talking about kind of risk avoidance like companies do that implement computer systems that scrape the internet for key terms, and then a red light would go on and they would see potential threat coming their way. That's risk management. That's not foresight. I'm really talking about understanding what the clients will need in the future and how you actually deconstruct their needs, understand the underlying psychology of that, and then ask yourself, okay, if we take that into consideration, into our strategic planning, what is it that we need to become as a company? So if you are an apparel producer today and you understand the global trends, the key trends in your industry, and how people are actually what they're craving for in this crazy world, you would probably ask yourself whether it's really an apparel company that you want to be, or whether it's something else that you serve, a client need that you serve. So that's the second thing where most companies just screw up. They don't try to understand their clients and don't try to build proprietary foresight. They just rely on external input like insights reports, and then they just keep on doing what they do or take the next logic step. But it's often way too normal. It's not really propelling them forward. And the third element, it's kind of related to that, external knowledge. You know more than you think. The knowledge that the people have in their head is incredibly valuable. Don't hire a major consultancy to come in and tell those brains what to do. You hire them for a reason. There's no reason to bring in external consultants creating a strategy and telling your best people what to do in the future. Instead, use what they have in their heads, use their knowledge, use their insight, use what they believe needs to happen, and listen to your clients rather than just listen to external consultants. I'm not saying don't use consultants. I'm a consultant myself. I'm saying use them wisely. Bring them in where they can add value. So you need probably someone like me helping you through the process, putting up some flags here and there. When I'm talking about consultants, I actually mean you can bring in additional manpower, you can bring in additional reports, additional knowledge, you can scale up very fast and get rid of those external costs when you don't need them anymore. So use them wisely in a good dosed way within the process, but own the process. You need to own the process, because the moment the externals go, you need to be able to implement that strategy without them. Once your own people created the strategy, your entire organizational identity, they own it. They want to see it come to life, and they will go the extra mile for it, rather than taking a 350-page PowerPoint deck created by a consulting company and going, I don't understand these graphics.
So let me validate real quick. If you want to screw up strategy, make it all about the owner's equity, income, lifestyle, share value, all of that. Be sure that you play from a place of scarcity and fear, that it's very limiting out there. And if you make mistakes, they're very hard to undo. Have that mindset if you want to blow it. Use external knowledge exclusively, because there are a bunch of other people that are the experts. So grab all the same data your competitors do and build from there. That's a way to screw it up too. And then the last one is be sure you use a consultant who's going to tell you what to do, so that when they leave, it's unsustainable.
Absolutely.
Those would be 3 great ways to blow strategy in your company.
I couldn't have said that better, Rich.
I love it. I think that was a beautiful access point. I want to clarify one thing, and I made a note on this, but I didn't get a chance to ask you about it earlier, but it came up again. I think you're defining a consultant and a coach as very different. I think what I heard you say is a consultant will tell you what to do from a place of authority. I know what I'm talking about. Here's what you need to do in this situation. Versus a coach believes you have the answers, and they'll guide you through a process to excavate the answers that you have, which leave you with your own answers and guide you through that process. Is that how you're defining? Because that's what I picked up on from what you said.
It's perfectly captured. And to give you an example from the world of sports, the coach stays on the sideline. The consultant plays on the pitch.
Love
So
that.
you bring a consultant in because your quarterback is injured. You bring an external in to fill in. But the coach stays on the sideline. The coach is the puppet master, kind of. He has the overarching process in mind, not the nitty-gritty detail here. Mm-hmm. The coach helps you through the process. The consultant adds manual labor, brain labor, resources of any kind, and then leaves again.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. Like your analogy to sports falls right into an area I love talking about. But when you talk about the accountability and ownership of a plan, there's nothing better than a professional sports coach can do but bring his sports team together before the season and say, what's our identity? I'm not going to tell you what this identity is. You guys are the one going on the pitch. What do you want this to be, right? How do you guys want the identity to be? And once they own it, then they hold each other accountable to it. So that when one of their players steps in the wrong direction, the team actually holds them accountable to what the plan was because they created it together. So I love that analogy to sports, and the coach stays on the sideline. Now, you may bring in strength and conditioning consultants, nutrition consultants, all the different consultants to help those players be better. But if you start replacing the players with consultants, you're living on a pretty weak infrastructure, right? Yeah. So I really love the way you brought that together. And Rich, I think it was a fantastic question. Like, how do you screw this up? Because I've definitely screwed up strategic plans or not done them and then think, well, why do we need a strategic plan? And I think the answer, Alex, you would give is if you are not creating a 3 to 5 year strategic plan and reviewing it every single year, then you're just satisfied with where you're at.
Exactly.
If you're satisfied with where you're at, that's fine. You don't need a strategic plan. Don't even bother calling me, by the way. But if you're not happy with where you want to achieve to greater areas, you do need a strategic plan, and you need someone to force you as a coach to stretch and get there. So I love the way you put all that together. And if I bring it back full circle to one big thing, is it's really creating a trust level within the organization that helps everybody stretch. That's kind of what I'm hearing, Alex, from everything you put together. On your LinkedIn page, your header has the word doubt, D-O-U-B-T, with the U-B-T scratched out, so all that's left is do. Where does that come from, and why is that important to you?
You're the first one who ever picks this up, actually, but it has a deeper meaning. It's also something I describe in my new book. I would rather see you start implementing an 80% perfect strategic plan and give it the best shot that you have and implement it full force, rather than waiting for the 90%, 95%, or 100% perfect strategy and just failing miserably in the execution. You will reach way more if you go for 80-20 and just run with it and let your people run with it, rather than waiting for the perfect thing that will never come anyway, because there is no such thing as a perfect strategy in an ever-evolving world. So what's right now, go for it. If it's 80% ready, go for it. You will learn so much on the way that you cannot include in your planning process because you don't know it yet.
Yeah.
So the experience that you gather from experimenting with new products, with new services, with a new type of leadership style that you try, or moving from waterfall project management to more agile methodologies, what you will learn and what your entire organization will learn is learning by doing, not learning by thinking.
Yep. Well, I hope you haven't trademarked doubt, the word doubt, because it's funny because Rich and I, we've had a little thing over the years amongst us, because I am usually the let's just do it. Let's just go. We don't have a plan at all, but we'll figure it out along the way. So we're not even 80%. We're like 0%. I'm like, go, go, go.
That's different, though.
I know. And Rich is on the other side of it, which is if it's not 100%, we're not exactly sure what we're doing. We're not coming off the bench. And what we do is we kind of yin and yang each other to the point where we do get to 80% or so and go, okay, now we can go. But we're a little uncomfortable, both of us, because I would have wanted to go at 0 and he wants to go at 100. And Rich, I thought that was pretty funny, thinking about the word doubt and how it relates to us.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. And the example, Alex, that we've used is John is ready, fire, aim. Get ready. Just put a shot up. I can adjust it. I know what my next shot will be based on the first shot missing. I'm not even worried about it missing. I just want to know where I'm at. And that's his default. Sometimes it gets him into trouble. Sometimes that's great. My default is like ready, aim.
You can aim better than that.
And sometimes that gets me into trouble. So it is well described, John, and a yin and a yang. Before we close with you, Alex, had a question for you on what are some of the best strategy books that our entrepreneurs could pick up and read or listen to while they're in the car?
Of course, mine. Well, mine is not out
yet.
yet.
Isn't out till next year, though.
Mine is not out there yet, so
that's right.
It's not a fair answer.
That's right.
Actually, this is a really good question, and the reason why I say that, my agent has actually researched the market for strategy books, recent books, and the stuff he came up with was exactly what we talked about in this episode today. They have the word strategy in the title, but when you take a look at those books, very often they are not at all about business strategy. They are about tactics for a certain area in your business. So when you want to talk about business strategy, I would always say, go back to the classics. Don't look for fancy new ways of designing and implementing strategy. There is just no fancy new way. There is no shortcut. If you want to build a business, you need to invest the long hours. You need to go the whole 9 yards. It's not just you sit there and you have a fancy idea and you write it down and that's it. That's not how strategy works. Strategy is hard work. And when it comes to back to the 9 elements of organizational identity, one of the key capabilities that I describe in the chapter about capabilities is actually strategic acumen, the ability to think and act strategically. Most of the people don't have that because they never learned it. There is no class on that in school. And if you don't study, let's say, general management or do an MBA, you might never have had exposure to that type of thinking in your career. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a muscle that you have never trained before. So when it comes to capabilities, and that's what books are all about, they are about capability building, about learning. The one thing that you should learn is how to think and act strategically and what that actually means and how it is different from running a business operationally. Once you get that, it will be way easier for you to start stretching that muscle and put yourself in that different state of mind that you need in order to build, reshape, redefine the strategy for your business. I hope that makes sense.
Great place to close. Strategic acumen, new word that I've never thought of those two words going together. Thank you, Alex, for your expertise today and sharing with our entrepreneurs. I'm sure they got a lot out of it.
It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
Developing strategic acumen. He dropped that towards the end, and I've never heard that going together. Strategic acumen. I think that that really defines a perspective that he has on what strategy is, how it can be developed, and ultimately how it needs to be executed.
Yeah, I love the we kind of went around a different way. We kind of started with business strategy, and then we worked our way a little bit back to, hold on, what are the elements of an organizational identity before you even get to the strategy? And even before that, we had a conversation about trust and vulnerability-based trust, which you seem to know quite a bit about. And we're sharing some tools, both of you guys, on how an organization can build it. And we didn't talk about it in the episode, but it did remind me of one of my favorite books, right, which is Stephen Covey Jr.'s Speed of Trust, and how dysfunctional a team can be when you don't have that trust and you're trying to devise a strategic plan, or you're trying to figure out your identity and everybody's just in it for themselves. There's no trust and you really can't get anywhere. And where you're getting is actually fake. And then you can't implement it or hold people accountable because it's fake and it's on a bed of straws and just falls, right? It just falls all apart. I know vulnerability-based trust is a Pat Lencioni thing. Is that where that came from?
Vulnerability-based trust is vulnerability. Brene Brown is the classic who dives into that.
Yeah, no. So that's certainly something that I feel like organizations struggle with, to be honest with you. Like, there's a little bit of survival, right? It's the base layer of needs that people have is to survive. And sometimes when you get into these strategic conversations that may stretch people, they start becoming uncomfortable and they start feeling vulnerable. It's a very difficult thing. It's easier said than done, I guess, is to be vulnerable in these situations.
Well, and you know who that reminds me of is our former guest, Erin Deal, with her improv group, that they were really working to desensitize failure in the workplace so that people then would be more comfortable going out and taking risks and being more innovative. And if you remember, she actually said in her business, she did failure parties.
Yep.
Where they would get together quarterly. Everybody would have one PowerPoint slide to put on graphics that would represent their biggest failures over the last quarter. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I think too many times in our businesses, people play the best foot forward game. And by the way, it starts with the leader who's playing the best foot forward game. The leader who believes they always have to have the answers. They always have to be polished. They always have to be the person that is the go-to person. It's okay as a leader to say, I'm not sure. or let me give you my half-baked idea, or here's an idea I have. I'm going to throw it out to you. I don't love it, but I'm going to throw it out to you hoping you'll be able to make it better. And I think that happens when we start to look at desensitizing failure in the workplace. One thing I'll tell you that we did recently, John, we have a summit for our largest business owners that just happened to be last week. I got this idea with another guy who I was planning the summit with, that we were going to use this failure idea that Aaron brought to the podcast. So we had our biggest businesses, the most successful. They wrote in a 1-page on their biggest failure in their business, what they learned from it, and what they're implementing differently. We have a booklet of 50 different failures in our business from our most successful owners. And then we had a facilitated room where we talked about those topics. And it's the beginning of starting to do better, I think, for our organization at desensitizing failure, which leads to vulnerability-based trust.
I love the way you connected those two, right? I almost feel like Aaron and Alex should talk, because Aaron could probably help in some of that's a different way of doing it. It brings comedy, it brings fail. And you're right. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs have a hard time being vulnerable in front of their team, and therefore other people feel hard being, have a hard time being vulnerable. And if you start off with the leaders being vulnerable themselves, it lets everybody know, oh, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable in this particular situation. So I love the way you brought that, back around and together, and it plays into the emotional attachment or the self-preservation. And if there's a more loose environment, you can accomplish better things. And I think it also plays into who are your leaders for the future. We didn't talk about this, but certainly when I, over the years, have grown leadership teams, you start identifying who on your leadership team leaves their ego and self-interests at the door and are coming in a very introspective, open-minded, what's best for the organization is also best for me mindset. And that really, you start identifying real quick, that person didn't really contribute a lot because they're so concerned about themselves. And it's a very difficult thing, as a young entrepreneur, to learn really quickly that if you give yourself to the organization and you trust the leadership that you have, it can put you in a really good position, because you'll elevate to points of this person cares more about the organization.
Well, and it'd be an interesting question to ask a leadership team, and I've never quite asked it this way, but it would be, what's more important to you, being right or getting it right? I have thought it's more important to me to get it right than it is to be right. I'm going to express my opinion, and often I can have an opinion, and often it can be strong. But at the end of the day, we don't need to go with my idea. I want to go with the best idea, and the best idea doesn't need to come from me. I don't need to be right. I want to get it right. And I think as leaders, if we could try that on when we're working with our people, our direct reports, the people who look up to us, the people who may even think we need to be perfect, to say, I'm not worried about being perfect. I want to get it right. Not just for me. I want to get it right for you on behalf of the organization and our customers, and to be able to have better production, better longevity of our business, better retention of our people. We need to get it right. Feel free to contradict me.
Yeah, I love that. And bringing it back full circle to strategic planning, one of the benefits you get when you get into a routine and people do have the expectations of, every year we're going to look at our 3 to 5 year plan, and every year we're going to kind of revisit it, and they see that it gets implemented, or they see the changes happen in the organization, they start believing in the process, things change. One of the companies that I'm with today, we started doing strategic planning in 2014. And we use the exact same, it's a 1-pager from Rockefeller Habits. It's a tool that we've been using. Mm-hmm. And we have the same 3 to 5 year plan. At the end of every session, we finalize it, we crystallize it. This is the plan, let's go, right? We have the same plan now for 7 years. And one of the first things we do every year is we sit back and for fun, we kind of look back at, what were we thinking 7 years ago? What were we thinking 3 years ago? What were we thinking? And then where are we? And the cool part is when you lay these plans that do stretch your mind, and you're like, there's no way we're gonna be able to hit that, but let's go for it, and then you start moving towards it, you start getting more buy-in. This process works. And so getting in the routine of implementing it and having the accountability to it, and the last piece I'll talk about here is the accountability to it. When your team creates it, they're more accountable to it. I think Alex nails that right in the coffin, right? Because a lot of people will just outsource, come help us do our strategic plan, and no one really cares about it. It's such a bad way of doing it. If you can really own it yourself and your team feels like they own it and they're shared across the organization, everybody's engaged to it.
I think a lot of people don't mind being told what to do. They just want to be part of the vision. They want to know where they stand in it. And if you're the type of leader that you're not comfortable creating a vision with your people or ultimately telling people where they fit in it, that's where you would take Alex's recommendation and get a coach, not a consultant who will do it for you, but get a coach who will bring that out of you and your team. So it's okay if you're not the type of leader who's going to go establish the vision and establish a responsibility matrix and all that. Work with a coach. Ultimately, that does need to be done. Just because you're not great at it, there's your opportunity to demonstrate vulnerability-based trust and let your team know, hey guys, you know I'm not great at this. I'm more of a day-to-day person and we grind it out together. We need to get somebody who's going to come in and help us establish a vision like what I heard about from Alex on Entrepreneurs United.